Transnistria. It was here that anti-Semitic policies of the Romanian authorities were enforced the most. And I will talk about the work of the ghettos, both from a historical and from a social perspective. So from autumn 1941 till the end of the war, Transnistria was the territory used by the Romanian authorities to implement their policy regarding the ethnical cleaning of the Romanian soil. As a result, nearly 200 ghettos became operational on the territory between the Leicester and the Bug. Starting from here, I will try to reconstruct the world of the ghettos with their internal organization and limited contact with the outside world. The analysis will be done on two distinct directions. The legislative system imposed by the Romanian authorities, and from this perspective I will also be interested in the reconstruction of the rationalization used by the Romanian authorities in order to legitimate their policy of ethnic cleaning, and the strategies developed by those deported in order to sidestep the limitation imposed by the legislative system. The analysis was conducted on two categories of sources: legal documents enacted by the Romanian authorities after 1941, and personal documents of those deported, letters, memories, diaries. For both categories of text of documents, the methodological approach was a qualitative one. So, in the fall and winter of 1941, around 180,000 to 190,000 deportees from Basarabia and Bucovina passed through the 5 crossing points along the Dniester: Moldova, Yampol, Râșnica, Tiraspol, and Ovidopol. They were joining some 300,000 local Jews. The gendarmerie was the institution charged with rounding up the Jews throughout Transnistria. According to Order Number 1, issued on September 8, 1941, they were to check the number of Jews in each town and village, verify the creation of ghettos, and to drive the Jews deported to Transnistria into them. The conditions under which all Jews, both deported and local, were to live were first outlined by General Hugo Schwab. His orders to the Romanian army in Transnistria, expressed in Ordinance Number 1, displayed in August 1941, stipulated that, I quote, "The Jews will live in ghettos, colonies, and labor camps. All the Jews at present in Transnistria who do not report to the authorities within 10 days from the posting of this order for the purpose of fixing their place of residence will be executed. The Jews are forbidden to leave the ghettos, labor camps, and convoys without the approval of the authorities. Those who did not respect this order will be punished by death if they had a subversive motivation. If not, they will be punished with 3 to 5 years in jail. Every Jew brought to Transnistria who tried to cross or who has crossed into Romania without the approval of the authorities will be executed. Anyone who gives any shelter to the Jews will be sent to prison for a period between 3 to 12 years and fined between 100 and 200 marks. It is forbidden to any civilian or military personnel to transport money, letters, or any other values destined to the Jews or sent by the latter. The offender will be sent to prison for a period between 3 to 5 years and fined between 100 to 500 marks. Following in the steps of this order, Colonel Nita Vasile, for example, the prefect of Balta County, issued Ordinance Number 4 regarding the establishment of a ghetto in the city of Balta. According to this document, all Jews in town, locals or not, were ordered to live in a delimited sector of the city, an area restricted to 4 streets. The former leader of the Jewish community becomes the mayor of the ghetto. Thank you. A bakery and a Jewish hospital will be opened within the ghetto. The floor will be provided by the city hall and paid by the inhabitants of the ghetto. The head of the ghetto was also authorized to organize a Jewish police force. All Jewish inhabitants of the ghetto between 14 and 60 of age will be used for forced labor. Entry and exit from the ghetto between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. was allowed only with a permit issued by the ghetto commandant. who was a gendarmerie officer. Any Jews arriving in Balta from now on will live in the ghetto. Any infringement of the law will be punished by death. The penalty will be applied to the offender and 20 other Jews. The punishment is even more drastic in the ordinance number 3 issued by Colonel Lazar this time on September 22. He was the prefect of Turchin County, where the document stipulates 100 instead of the 20 Jews executed alongside the offender. The rest of the rulings are similar with those ordered through ordinance number 4. In the middle of October 1941, Colonel Emil Brașceanu, head of the gendarmerie in Transnistria, reported to Gheorghe Alexianu, the governor of Transnistria, that the concentration of the local Jews has been completed. John Anchel speaks of 165 identified camps and ghettos and dozens of collective and state farms that serve as temporary camps. In the early days of the Romanian regime in Transnistria, for example, Berșa was the largest ghetto between the Leicester and the Bug, with roughly 20,000 deportees, in addition to a local Jewish population of 4 to 5,000 Jews. In November 1941, Governor Alexianu issued Ordinance number 23, this fundamental document stating from now on the status of the Jews in Transnistria, either we are talking about deported or local ones. This ordinance remained in force until the spring of 1944. According to this decree, the Inspectorate of Gendarmes in Transnistria determines the localities where the Jews can be housed. A Jew can only leave the commune in which his domicile has been fixed if he has the authorization of the prefect. The Jews will be subjected to forced labor obligation according to their profession. They will be used for agricultural labor, for road or bridge repair, for wood cutting, quarrying stone, and so on. Any Jews found in a place other than that in which his residence is fixed without the approval of the authorities will be considered a spy and punished according to the military law in time of war, meaning he will face execution. Consequently, according to the official orders issued by the Romanian authorities, due to their dangerous and parasitical nature, the Jews were gathered in special designated places where they could be segregated from the local population. They were deprived of any rights and were subjected to a forced labor regime. They risked heavy penalties, usually death, when deciding to break the official regulation. In January 1942, when the large deportation from Basarabia, Bucovina, and Dorohoi ended, most deportees were concentrated in 3 districts, Moldova, Tulcin, and Balta. With the exception of 2 camps, Bărbulescu and Veciora, and Râmnița prison, the Jews were gathered in ghettos, or in the localities they were ordered to live to a more or less organized forced labor system. The ghettos had no social infrastructure to assist the internees, and the approximately 200 camps and ghettos in Transnistria had several things in common. They were cold and crowded, the food supply was meager, and in many cases at starvation level, they were ravaged by typhus, and the death rate, particularly in the period between October 1941 and spring 1942, was horrendous. The example offered by Denis Geletan is quite enlightening. In Warsaw Ghetto, the death toll was 20 to 50%, while in Transnistria it reached 30 to 50% during winter 1941. Take for example Shargorod Ghetto. Here, a hill occupied by some 300 old crumbling houses made of mud brick patched together on narrow street was declared a ghetto by the head of Mondilev's Shargorod sub-district. In December 1941, some 9,000 Jews were packed in the ghetto, most of them from Bucovina. There were no bathrooms, public or private, no trash collection, and no garbage pits. The water was dirty, as the few natural springs surrounding the town were forbidden to the Jews. A march order from the autumn of 1941 helps us understand how things were organized by the Romanian authorities. I quote, in accordance with order number 76769 from 1941 of Army Headquarters and the accompanying order of the Governor of Transnistria, are transferring to you Jews, men, women, and children, in order that they be detained in the detention area of this village. The village authorities will see to the accommodation for these Jews, monitor them to ensure that they do not leave the settlement. Consequently, the model was quite simple. They were brought to a rural area, confined to it under heavy penalties, and sometimes they had no means to provide for their food, while other times they were to work in order to receive some food. Either way, their chances of survival were minimal, and the legal framework constructed by the Romanian authorities did not provide the minimal means of assistance for those deported. Arriving at this point, to understand how the world in the ghettos unfolded, I will turn toward the memoirs of those surviving deportation, proposing this time a social approach instead of the historical one. My interest at this point being to identify the strategies used by those deported in order to sidestep the limitations imposed by the legislative system. To understand these strategies, we need to turn what I may call the terms identity models. Allow me to explain what I have in mind. When individuals live in a unitary social world, in other words, when the identity models once assumed for himself is also accepted as legitimate by the others, the question, who am I, is a non-problematic one. It can receive multiple answers, all equally correct. The problem arises when some same individuals live in different social worlds, worlds that configure in different manners their roles, and consequently worlds between which questions like who am I, X, for example, and who is X, receive distinctive answers. To be clear, I am interested in the scenario when under the influence of external factors, individuals end up losing a fragment or the entire complex of identity markers that generated their social world, and in my opinion, this was the case for those deported in Transnistria. Consequently, I propose to look at Transnistria deportation from a social perspective, more specifically the one developed by Goffman through his concept of total institution. Goffman defines as total institution any isolated and enclosed social system where for longer or shorter periods of time individuals are required to a formalized way of life, imposed upon them by an authority legitimated as such. The standard example he offers are prisons, mental hospital, and concentration camps. The main characteristics of any total institution being the requirement of major conformity with the norms imposed by the authorities. When we talk about Transnistria, we already know that the deportation process was not a unitary one. There were several camps and hundreds of ghettos. All of them were at least theoretically enclosed areas that fall, following Goffman, under the definition of total institution. Moreover, the definition of reality held by the Romanian authorities, the definition that sees the Jew as a dangerous element of society and determines all the sanctions and discriminatory measures imposed upon him, is also interiorized as legitimate by the broader society, the one beyond the border of the ghetto. That means that when analyzing the Transnistria phenomenon, we need to go further than Goffman does, and to identify a second level where the total institution operates, the communitarian one, that consists not just the area within the ghetto walls, but also overlaps on the rural or urban localities where the ghetto is built. In Transnistria, the Jew remained the holder of the same definition of reality that led to his deportation. According to this deportation, all Jews are identical with a fictive Jew, defined as a parasite and as a dangerous element of the society, and as a consequence expelled outside of it. His social status is perilous, as he is defined by no right and under heavy penalties when breaking the regulations imposed by the Romanian authorities. They could be beaten, stolen, and even killed with no penalty imposed upon the offender. Moreover, the difference is that this regulation imposed between the Jew and all the others determines the manifestation of this legitimate aggression beyond the borders of the ghetto's walls. According to the memoirs of the survivor, they could just as easily become the victims of the local population that were free to handle the Jews as they saw fit. According to the official regulations, if, for example, ordinances number 3, 4, and 23, a Jew interned in the ghetto or camp is not allowed to trespass the borders of the facility, but if he stays inside and plays by the official rules, he will die of starvation, thirst, cold. However, if he chooses not to accept for himself the definition of reality imposed by the authorities, he will be killed as punishment for the infringement of this regulation. So, what was the solution? What surviving strategies could be developed? According to the memoirs of those surviving deportation, the solution consisted in the construction of a parallel system of norms and a special type of social capital. Both will allow his survival within the system, as he will accept the status imposed by the authorities, but will play his role following his own rules. In general terms, the game was quite simple: to stay inside and die of starvation, or to go outside and risk to be executed as a spy. The danger was even more present as usually the local communities acted as de facto total institutions. The theoretical solution was invisibility, while the practical one was the creation of social networks. The social networks will provide the Jew the social capital that will make possible his survival. In other words, he will identify the inhabitants of the villages around the ghetto or those nearby it that are capable to see him as a human and not a Jew. By passing in this way the official definition of reality, this network of trust is to be used time and again, providing the inmates with the so much needed food, wood, and sometimes even medicine. However, apart this social network, there are also special areas outside the ghettos and special periods of the year where individuals that usually accept the social definition of reality, and by doing so, they are labeled as dangerous by the ghetto inmates, became capable to see the human behind the Jew. Such special area is the local cemetery, while such special periods of time are the Christian holidays or the funerals. Not less important, this network of trust is doubled by a network of legitimate aggressiveness, which consists of individuals, places, and periods of time that have to be avoided at all costs. The main roads, some local houses, the soldiers, the Romanian soldiers, or the mornings are just some examples of avoiding the dangerous situations. Consequently, if we would take the example of a fictive Jew living in a ghetto near a fictive village, we have an objective map of reality with its roads, springs, and houses, a map that represents a physical and social world with its borders and rules, and another one that our fictive Jew overlaps upon this objective map of reality, and which allows him to overcome the definition of reality imposed upon him by the authorities. On the objective map, our fictive village could have, let's say, 70 houses and 2 springs, while on the map used by our Jew, it has 2 houses and no springs. But there are special places and special times of the year when the inhabitants of the houses unmarked on the map of our Jew are safe to meet, because in these places and in these periods of the year, they are ready to allude to the official definition of reality and open to see the human behind the Jew. For the deportees within the former world, there were legitimate and illegitimate means to attain their primary needs. Before, within this legitimate framework, a kilo of potatoes, for example, could have been bought, received, or gathered from his garden. Now, the same potatoes will be bought, baked, stolen, or received. Each of these methods becomes perfectly legitimate in the world of the ghetto and represents another way through which the individual plays by his own rule the role imposed upon him by the official definition of reality. These new rules suppose the development of a new kind of knowledge, a practical one, that allows him to minimize the risks generated by behavior that also became legitimate within the ghetto continues to be penalized in the outer world. This practical knowledge could take various forms, from methods that minimize the risks involved by stealing, if, for example, practiced when the Ukrainian peasants sue their land, or when the wagons are driven by old men to means of maximize the chances of begging, like learning a general Ukrainian prayer, for example. The practical knowledge and the social networks developed outside the ghetto represent what Goffman calls the clandestine life of the total institution, to which, in our case, the Jew assumes the role attributed to him by the authorities by placing this role to his own rules, developing a strategy that allows him to break from the collective definition imposed by the authorities, although he is not capable to assess the identity model that prior deportation was his own. However, the developed strategy still represents what Goffman calls ritual disobedience, an unauthorized break from the role imposed upon the individual by the institutional order. However, inside the ghetto, we may also find activities that allow individuals to have quick access to their former life. A dancing evening in Mogilev or Chorus in Bersha, a school for Ghettos children, or the celebration of the Jewish holidays are all such examples. They represent individual strategies that allow recreating, even for short periods of time, lost worlds, and by doing so to have access to stolen identities. In conclusion, the world of the ghettos was a grueling and complex one. If we look only at the official document, we found that for the Jews it was a lose-lose situation. The deportation equaled death. Either they were following the official regulation through starvation, cold, etc., or if they decided to infringe them through execution. However, if we turn toward the memoirs of those surviving the ordeal, we find that although the official definition of reality remains in place, strategies were developed and that allowed individuals to play the role imposed by the authorities by their own rules. Following Goffman, I have named these strategies the clandestine life of the ghetto. There were forms of adaptation to a coercive social system that became operational, to the creation of new forms of social capital and the development of a special practical knowledge. Thank you.